afternoon, everybody. And I want to say a very special welcome to all of you who chose to spend this Sunday afternoon participating in the second Chiquibul Symposium. I want to start off by saying a very special greetings to the 100 registered attendees who chose to participate in today's session. And thanks to technology and the collaboration with the media, you're also able to tune into today's event through the various live streams on Facebook and, of course, from the comfort of your home on television. We have a very exciting afternoon planned for you, one that is sure to be very informative. And of course, for those of you who need a little bit of a refresher, this is the second symposium being hosted by the Friends for Conservation and Development. And the last one was held 7 years ago. And thankfully, even in the time of a pandemic, we're able to have today's event where we can find out a bit more about the work that has been done since then and get a clearer picture as to what the existing threats are today. So once again, welcome. I am your moderator, Marlene Cuellar, and we are going to officially get this afternoon session started with the national anthem of Belize.
By the Carib Sea, our manhood we pledged to thy liberty. No tyrants here linger, despots must we restrain the haven of democracy. The blood of our savage colours the sun brought freedom from slavery, oppression's run. By the might of truth and the grace of God, no longer shall we be used of wood. Arise, ye sons of the Baymen's clan, put on your armor, clear the land, drive back the tyrants, let despots flee. Land of the free, by the Carib Sea. Nature has blessed me with wealth untold, o'er mountains and valleys where prairies roll. Our fathers, the Baymen, valiant and bold, drove back the invaders as heritage hold. From Port Rio Hondo to Old Sassoon, through Coral Isle over Blue Lagoon, we watched with the angels, the stars and moon, for freedom comes to. Of the free, by
And every time they put together an event or they're able to put forward information to help to educate us as to what's going on there, it's always one that we walk away knowing so much more about what is happening in the Chiquibul, and also understanding a bit more of the intricacies of the work that the organization undertakes in the Chiquibul Forest. As a bit of an overview, of course, when we talk about the Chiquibul Forest, it includes understanding a bit more of the intricacies of the work that the organization undertakes in the Chiquibul Forest. As a bit of an overview, of course, when we talk about the Chiquibul Forest, it includes the Caracol Archaeological Maya Temple, also the Chiquibul National Park, and the Chiquibul Forest Reserve. We are talking about a co-management effort that covers the largest protected area in Belize, over 437,000 acres of land. Of course, much of that land is with a shared border with Guatemala, which makes for the management of the area even more sensitive and very difficult as well because of the remoteness. A part of what we'll be looking at today is the theme for today is looking primarily at the current threats. In 2013, when the FCD hosted its first symposium, some of the threats that were identified then were also caused a part of the movement that took place after. The efforts that have been made since then, today we'll be able to see what progress has been made, and we'll also be able to look at what the realities in 2021 look like for the rangers who are working in the field, for those who rely on the resources that the Chiquibul has to offer. We all know how beautiful, as you can see, I am at least virtually being placed in the Chiquibul at this time, but so that we can all share in the wonders of what the Chiquibul has to offer. We have a special introduction for you this morning where you will get to see firsthand the amazing wonders of the Chiquibul.
The Great Chiquibul Forest blanket 500,000 hectares of rugged karst topography along Belize's western border with Guatemala. Soaring above, hidden within, and buried below the largest and most pristine protected area in Belize lives a menagerie of creatures so unique they dwarf our imagination. Far above the canopy, drifting with the wind in a loop-the-loop pattern of rising air currents, floats the king vulture, the royalty of forest scavengers. Silently scanning the treetops for monkeys and porcupines, squirrels and opossums, anteaters and kinkajous is the largest and most powerful raptor of all Central America rainforests, the harpy eagle. The Chiquibul is one of the final strongholds for the brilliant scarlet macaw. These riotously large parrots nest in the trees along the Macal and the Raspaculo rivers. Yet, each morning for 3 months out of the year, they fly east en masse across the entire country to feed on fruit-bearing trees along the eastern slopes of the Maya Mountains. And there is a nondescript gray bird the size of a large butterfly called a slate-colored solitaire with one of the most angelic voices in nature. Early mornings and late evenings under the natural arch, the ethereal song resonates through the forest. And this is just 4 of nearly 300 species of birds that make the forest of the Chiquibul home. But there is so much more than just birds. A 1996 survey found 26 species of large mammals living in the Chiquibul, including 7 that are threatened with extinction. The king of the wildcats, the jaguar, the stealthy and powerful puma, the shy margay, the smallest wildcat, the jaguarundi, our national animal, the tapir, the rare southern river otter, and the acrobatic spider monkey. If not for the Chiquibul, each of these animals could disappear from Earth in our lifetime. In 2001, a short and limited 4-week study captured 15 species of small mammals in the Chiquibul and 92 reptiles and amphibians, including 18 endemic species and 37 endangered species have been recorded in the swamps, rivers, streams, and the nearly 3,000 species of plants in the Chiquibul. As you might deduce from the number of creatures calling the Chiquibul home, these forests are the hotspot of biodiversity in Belize. The Chiquibul is the great provider of life, a breeding ground and a fountain of biological wealth that is shared with the rest of Belize. That such a marvelous and mysterious habitat still exists and its tenants still thrive is, for the moment at least, a reason for all Belizeans to rejoice and be proud. There is so much more to celebrate than just the animals of the Chiquibul. The Great Unbroken Tropical Forests are one of the largest carbon sinks in Central America, helping to combat global warming and potentially providing a sustainable income through carbon credits. These forest giants filter the air we breathe, taking in the carbon dioxide heating the earth and exhaling pure oxygen. Developed nations pay us to keep these lungs of the world healthy. The roots of these forests protect and replenish the soils, preventing them from washing into the rivers, out into the sea where muddy floodwaters can bury marine life. Beneath the trees and roots and soils lay hidden one of the largest cave systems in the world. These caves, ancient coral reefs hollowed by millennia of flowing spring and rainwater, build spectacular formations of limestone and are home to unique cave dwellers and many of the 75 different species of bats in Belize. This seemingly endless cave system also shelters some of the most sacred and spiritual artifacts of a long ago. This complex of palaces and temples remains today the tallest human-made construction in Belize. With all these wonders and treasures that still exist in the Chiquibul, probably the most valuable asset of all is mostly hidden from sight: the water. The watersheds of the Chiquibul are huge, flowing as much underground as above, and eventually enter the great rivers of Belize, providing clean, fresh drinking water for the Belize River Valley, including Belize City, 40% of our population in the country. The healthy watersheds of the Chiquibul provide a multitude of ecosystem services, including nutrient cycling, carbon storage, erosion control, increased biodiversity, soil formation, wildlife movement corridors, water storage, water filtration, flood control, food, timber and recreation, as well as reduced vulnerability to invasive species and mitigating the effects of climate change and other natural disasters. These goods and services are essential to our social, environmental, and economic well-being and are free. as long as a healthy Chiquibul exists. We in Belize are now on a threshold of losing much of our natural landscape. We have done unimaginably terrible things to much of our countrysides. It is only along portions of our coast, some remote sections of the northern plains, the monumental landscape of the Maya Mountains and the Mountain Pine Ridge, including the vast Chiquibul Forests, that the ancient richness and the wonder of natural life is not yet destroyed. We at FCD are tasked with seeing that it stays that way.
Absolutely breathtaking. You know, one of the objectives that FCD has in putting forward today's event is not only in helping people to stay informed and educated, but also to fall in love with the Chiquibul and want to visit. And after seeing those images, I can't imagine why it wouldn't be on the top of all of our bucket list after today. You know, in hearing some of the information, and let me take a moment here actually before I move forward to say thank you to some of our sponsors. The imagery that you just saw was provided by Tony Rath Photography. We also want to say thank you to Natural Light Production, Millennial Studios for the graphics, the video production, and artwork that went into today's event. We also want to say thank you to Idea Lab Studios for the technical coordination of this symposium, and using the virtual platform with the kind assistance of Nicole Usher Solano. Of course, we want to say a big thank you to the media houses with whom there has been continuous collaboration in bringing the issues out of the deep forest and into the national spotlight. And today, FCD wants to thank A Great Belize Productions, Channel 5, Channel 7, Creme Television, and Love TV, who continue to support the efforts of FCD by showcasing their work. And today's symposium would not have been possible without the help of the U.S. Department of the Interior and the Wildlife Conservation Society. Now, after viewing that video, I think it's a great time for us to be able to talk about how you can get involved. So the first thing, you can visit the FCD website. That's fcdbelize.org. You can also become a member of the FCD. It is open to students, professionals, individuals, families, and organizations, and membership forms you can get right there on that website. Of course, it is an NGO and donations are welcomed. And so donate and become a friend of the FCD and the Chiquibul. It's a not-for-profit NGO, and it welcomes the donations throughout the year towards the many different programs that they have ongoing. And that spans from being able to ensure that the park rangers are there to be able to do their work, educational research, youth outreach, sustainable best practice training, adventure expeditions, and so much more. So we hope that by the time the symposium is over, that you make a decision to become a member and to assist in donating and supporting the work of FCD. So let's get moving into our symposium for this afternoon. And let me give you a brief overview of what you can expect over the next 2 hours. So we're starting off by hearing from some of the key government representatives in Belize's government, who will be able to talk about some of the ongoing work and their commitment to supporting the efforts of FCD. We'll be hearing from the Minister of Sustainable Development, Climate Change, and Risk Management, Honorable Orlando Habet. We'll also be having a very engaging conversation. We have 3 panelists who are going to be talking to us about the threats to the Chiquibul today. It'll be a very interesting look at how things have changed over the past 7 years, and what are some of the concerning activities that they have detected as of today. Prime Minister Honorable John Briceño will also be giving today's keynote address. We're looking forward to hearing from him as to what this administration has in the plans for sustainable development and in being able to maintain the protected areas like the Chiquibul moving forward. Another part of what we wanted to be able to share with you today is to share some of the faces of those who are dedicated to the work of FCD. So periodically, we'll be introducing you to some of the team members of FCD throughout the course of this afternoon's event. Also, we'll be hearing from the partner organizations that work along with FCD, those who work within the Chiquibul Forest, who have supported in some way or another the work that is ongoing there, in some testimonials. And then Executive Director Rafael Manzanero will be sharing with us the Chiquibul Call to Action. And before we close off today's event, you or attendees, those of you who registered early, who decided to share your afternoon with us, those of you who are watching on the live streams on the multiple platforms on Facebook, we will be taking some time to answer the questions that you may have throughout the course of this afternoon's event. So I'll be giving you the details as to how you can get those questions in. We have a dedicated team who will be tracking those so that we can ensure that we answer as many of your questions as possible, but nearer to the end of this afternoon's symposium. So let's get started. And to be able to provide the opening remarks for this afternoon, we're going to have Minister of Sustainable Development, Climate Change, and Risk Management, Honorable Orlando Habet.
Honorable John Briceño, Prime Minister of Belize, members of the Board of Directors of the Friends for Conservation, Mr. Rafael Manzanero and FCD team, participants all. The Chiquibul Forest, this multifaceted phenomenon with its seemingly endless jungle, capturing in its diversity and countless microenvironments. How majestic! The expanse and the magic of the Chiquibul Forest landscape can best be understood by getting inside of it. As the Minister responsible for sustainable development, I am blessed with the opportunity I have had to visit the area, both from the air and on the ground, in the early days of my tenure and administration. Now, I can understand the reason why so many people take this place so dearly, including the staff of the Friends for Conservation and Development. Their 12 years on location has marked great strides in reclaiming this western wilderness region, which represents some 7.7% of Belize's landmass. The theme, Restoring a National Patrimony, is fitting for this symposium, since the research, studies, and mere observation demonstrates that there is a recovery of the area, rendering it safer even for the common visitor. Nature is resilient, and in the Chiquibul, nature is being reclaimed and restored. The wildlife is returning, and stocks of species under threat are recovering well. However, we must be conscious that any rich resource, such as those found in the Chiquibul, can always remain threatened by the short-term benefits and interests. But also fitting is the fact that today, March 21, is celebrated as International Forest Day, one which was established on the 28th of November 2012 by the United Nations General Assembly. Maintaining a legacy for the future is imperative for this region, particularly since the Chiquibul jungles contain numerous goods and services for the many rural and urban communities. Water is but only one of those goods derived. While it is known that Belize boasts one of the highest per capita water assignations in the Americas, it is well documented that over 40% of the Belizean population depends on the Chiquibul headwaters for this basic yet valuable and more so indispensable resource. It is said that man has an instinctual yearning to be out in the wild and has been proven to be deeply powerful and healing for our minds, bodies, and souls. Scientific research on ecotherapy and nature bathing is fascinating and validates that the outdoors is absolutely necessary for sanity. And so, we see and appreciate more of the non-extractive benefits of our resources. These jungles have been hidden and tucked away, but as the area becomes more accessible, both in terms of less physical threats and due to the road accessibility, the call is for all of us to be cognizant of the importance of this wilderness area and to be good stewards of the resources. My government has a role to play, but all of us need to do our part. We need to pass legislation to set in place mechanisms for sustainable use of the resources, yet keeping areas as pristine and bountiful will be necessary. We have commenced with Cabinet officially establishing the National Biodiversity Office, and now we are preparing the legislation to be put in place for its legal mandate. In that light, my ministry is exploring an expanded role of the FCD to become more prominent at the landscape level, and the concept of a Chiquibul Maya Mountains Landscape Conservation Trust is at the heart of this administration, as pointed out on the government #PlanBelize manifesto. I must mention that FCD has proven to be an assertive co-manager at the face of dire dangers and uphill struggles. Certainly, the recovery successes have been possible through the finances provided by foundations and individuals, and it is my hope that the Protected Areas Conservation Trust, which my CEO chairs, and other conservation trusts, and the private sector can continue to provide much-needed financial support to FCD. Friends, I leave you with this excerpt by Prince Philip. The conservation of nature, the proper care for the human environment, and a general concern for the long-term future of the whole of our planet are absolutely vital if future generations are to have a chance to enjoy their existence on this earth. I thank you and have a fruitful symposium.
And there you heard the opening remarks of Honorable Orlando Habet, Minister of Sustainable Development, Climate Change, and Disaster Risk Management. Now, as I mentioned earlier, throughout the course of today, I'm going to be introducing you to some of the dedicated team members of Friends for Conservation and Development. And first up, let me introduce you to Chief Eco Guard at FCD, Ishmael Landero. The Eco Guards are the personnel who monitor the gates at Moyahon and Vaca for Bicol, so they are the key checkpoints of security for the Chiquibul Forest.
Hi there, I'm an eco guard here of the Vaca region, and this is the Chiquibul Symposium 2021.
And as I said, that will be a part of what you'll be seeing throughout the course of this afternoon, meeting some of the faces behind the work of the FCD. Now we move into our panel discussion for this afternoon. I'm going to be joined by 3 panelists, and I can see Dr. K is joining us. There is Derek, and we should be joined shortly by Major Rogelio Pop. This afternoon, our panel discussion will be focusing on the threats to the Chiquibul Forest. Each one of our panelists have a unique perspective to share based on the work that they have been doing within the Chiquibul. Dr. Elma Kay is a Belizean scientist, a university professor and co-founder of the University of Belize's Environmental Research Institute, UBERI. Dr. Elma Kay. She is currently the Administrative Director and Science Director for the Sustainable Lands Program. She also serves as the Vice President of the FCD Board. We have with us Derek Chan. Derek Chan is the Park Manager for the Chiquibul National Park. Previously, he worked with the Belize Audubon Society and the Belize Zoo, and he has been involved in park management for more than 20 years and was one of the founding young members involved in raising awareness of the Chiquibul. Also on this afternoon's panel, Major Rogelio Pop of the Belize Defense Force. The work of the FCD, as you would imagine, would not be possible without the collaboration of the Belize Defense Force. Major Pop is the operations officer at BDF headquarters, and he's responsible for the overall conduction of patrols and deployments nationally. Major Pop works closely with FCD as part of the Joint Forces operations aimed at protecting the Chiquibul and Vaca forests. And so I have 2 of our 3 panelists with us at this time. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Marlene.
Good afternoon, dear Marlene.
All right.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone.
And just before we dive into our conversation for this afternoon, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that we have gotten word of the passing of a conservation giant in Belize. Sharon Matola, the founder of Belize Zoo, passed away. And I know that on behalf of FCD and the organizers, and personally as well, having met and interviewed her a few times, it is a great loss to all of us, and we want to take a moment to acknowledge the work that she has done in conservation in this country, and I'm sure that the panel shares the same.
Yes, absolutely, Marlene. It's a great loss, big conservation giant.
All right. Well, let's get into this afternoon's conversation. As I said, for the attendees who are with us at this time, I know we may mention a few things that will trigger thoughts or questions that you'll want answered. You may go ahead and post those in the Q&A section. We have a team of volunteers who will be monitoring, and we'll address those in the Q&A section, in the question and answer section later on in today's event. But let's get started by finding out more of the day-to-day work that takes place within the Chiquibul. And Derek, that makes me want to hear a bit from you. In the last symposium, some of the threats that were identified, and there were multiple, but one that comes to mind is looking at the harvesting of chate. Now, this was 7 years ago, and quite notably, it's not been as persistent of an issue as it used to be back then. I want to ask you, what are the efforts that have been taken to be able to mitigate that situation? And what have we learned from that experience that can be applied in today's reality?
Yeah, the chate industry at the time, 2013, when we had the symposium, it was already declining. I think it made its peak there about 2010. Mm-hmm. It took a lot of effort in getting that to stop. It's not 100% probably at the time right now, but in our last study, which was about 2 years ago, we recorded that there was, about 99% of it had stopped. Mm-hmm. But there is a lot of the effort comes from, patrols on the ground, but also working with our national counterparts in Guatemala, creating awareness, policy change. There's different things that that did help. And we learned a lot. Mainly, one of the things that I think we can say we learned was that when SHATE started around the early 2005, I think, mm-hmm. we thought they would go away, right? By 2010, the chateros were all over the Chiquibul. And so when the SHATE is finished, they'll go away. No, they didn't. They mapped the entire Chiquibul in their brains, and that opened for a domino effect, a ripple effect on other things that could have been harvested, hunting, macaque poaching, illegal logging, etc. So I think also we also learned to work more in partnership. And I think with us, we have today a Major Pop who is with the Belize Defense Force. We have been able to work with them together in this past 12, 14 years out there in the Chiquibul. We have been able to marry two a governmental with a non-governmental organization to be able to let's say, to combat, these illegal activities in a safe and humane way to protect, the Chiquibul Forest. Working in binational programs, working with our binational partners and communities in Guatemala has also been a very good lesson learned. And that is what, because when we came in, it was SHATE, everything was SHATE. And that's why the word is still there. In fact, everyone, every time you see someone illegal in the Chiquibul, we say a chatero, not necessarily a chatero. It's just be an illegal person in the park. Yeah.
That's interesting how even the name continues, even though that particular activity doesn't pose as much threat as it did back then. But looking at today's reality, 2021, how would you categorize the current threats in the Chiquibul?
I think the bigger threat, or the biggest threat right now to us is the agriculture encroachments. And the agriculture is very broad because it's the production of food. And it can be crops, it can be cattle, but it's always removing of the forest, converting the forest into arable land, let's say, or land for agriculture, because it's not necessarily arable in the Chiquibul. But what that brings is the type of the methods they use to convert the forest into the preparing for the land for the agriculture. It's usually slash and burning, and that creates another problem with fires. Last year, it was one of the worst years in terms of fires. For the Chiquibul, it was like the first year we had seen a massive fire. It was either climate change or the weather pattern, but the wind was blowing towards from the north, like sort of like southeast. And that gave, the possibility for the fire to enter into the Chiquibul. So I would say then that agriculture, forest fires are on top in terms of the biggest threat that we have right now. And of course, that breaks down into cattle ranching and the crops. And then we have the gold panning, which is, once again, they cause forest fires because the people who are doing the gold panning, they will light fires, like at their camps, whatever. Somehow a fire would, at this time of the year particularly, just erupt and burn, thousands of acres. And we have seen that in 5 years ago, and it's becoming vicious because fire kind of like prepares itself for another year. So fire is, brings another type of regrowth, and mostly it's tiger fern. Tiger fern is vicious. Tiger fern likes fire. And then it changes the forest as it goes by. All these fires are happening in the watershed, so it is dangerous. It is important that the people who cause these fires, are along the border, because all along the border in the Guatemalan side, there are farmers, and they need to understand. They need to train themselves and prevent, fires from escaping, because the watersheds, the water from the Chiquibul goes into Guatemala and it feeds these farms and it feeds these villages. So it is important that the Guatemalans on the other side understand and help us, because, at the end of the day, if you look at how the watersheds are designed, naturally, the Chiquibul produces the majority of the water that goes into that area of the Chiquibul in Petén. So yeah, that is that's how it is, though, and that's how I categorize it: the forest fires, the gold panning, and the there of sure.
This type of human interaction within the Chiquibul, and as you clearly noted, I think in your last example, looking at how it can impact water sources, gives me an opportunity to speak to both Dr. K and Major Pop. Major Pop, from the perspective of the joint patrols that do take place among the FCD rangers and the BDF, and the sensitivity of monitoring the Belize-Guatemala border there in the Chiquibul. And Dr. K, from the perspective that the importance of the watershed and how it is impacted by this type of human interaction in this area. Let's start with you, Dr. K.
Thanks, Marlene. Yes, in terms of the the value of the Chiquibul for water and the threats that are there, it's a watershed area is a large area of forest. So that in itself is already important, just as a catchment area, an area where the water falls, is collected, and then, gets deployed to the various rivers and streams and all of that. But the other thing is that the Chiquibul actually holds the headwaters of the Belize River. So the tributaries like the Macal, those originate there and then eventually become the Belize River that supplies the majority of our population. And so it is actually really important to maintain the integrity of those headwaters, because what happens up there will affect what is happening downstream. Headwaters also provide critical nutrients that are needed further down. And headwaters also support unique biodiversity, especially like with amphibians and birds, that, it may be different from elsewhere. So what Derek was talking about in terms of the degradation, to me, fire is one of the threats that we really need to fear, because it really degrades an area. So you can have deforestation where the trees are removed, and that is already bad. But just the fires and the burning and degrading of the area reduces the sort of functionality or how how the headwaters operate. So that in itself is important. As a watershed, we need to protect the forest that is there. And in terms of the headwaters, we need to make sure that the processes that generate those waters and feed those nutrients and that unique biodiversity is not disrupted.
Major Pop?
All right. Good afternoon, Marlene. Before I answer, I get to your question, I would like to start out by saying that the BDF's function that involves collaboration with the FCD, especially within the Chiquibul, falls under our overarching mandates as guided by our laws. These mandates are broad, which speaks to the defense of Belize, aid to civil power and any other task, obviously. So I want to point out that before the establishment of the conservation posts, the BDF have been integral in patrolling the borders on stages or rotations of minimum 2 weeks deployments, tracking, documenting the many incursions that is done by Guatemalan peasants, and where these are approved for destruction, they would destroy them. As time progressed, though, the CPs were established. We cut down on those long-range patrols, and as it is currently within the Chiquibul Forest reserves, we have approximately 6 CPs interspersed at approximate distances of 10 to 15 kilometers. From where me and you are sitting, Marlene, these songs relatively close, but due to the rugged terrain, the gaps between these CPs still are huge, and it's difficult to contain all the threats that exist. Now, in terms of our collaboration with FCD, first and foremost, we serve as the security mechanism that strengthens and facilitates FCD's enforcement of its mandates. This is obviously because of the firepower capabilities that we possess. I must say that this collaboration is critical, and it hinges on balancing the diplomatic efforts, as you alluded to, the territorial claim that is lodged by Guatemala and Belize. There are certain requirements that must be fulfilled, and that, especially when we're dealing with Belize and Guatemala, there is a confidence building measure in place that we have to satisfy also. So it's basically a balancing act to balance that CBM as well as the mandate of FCD. And this is very critical because we understand the long-term impact of degradation to our natural resources, especially within Chiquibul, have huge impacts on the very survival of future generations of Belizeans. So then without this collaboration, we would probably have to ask what would be the value or the credibility of defending a scorched earth. So we have to look at it from that perspective, and it is actually very important. So that is how we look at our function with FCD.
You know, if I also look back to the time the entire country came out to support FCD in its telethon fundraiser in trying to get more rangers working on the ground, it brings me back to Derek once again, because as you rightly pointed out, Major Pop, you know, we talk about an increase in conservation posts, but an increase in a large span of area, over 400,000 acres, it still means that there's a lot of ground to cover. Derek, let's take a moment to put into to allow us to understand more about the number of people who are actually working within the Chiquibul to continue to monitor these different types of activities that you have noted so far.
Yeah. Well, currently we have 4 conservation posts along the border, and then we have 3 in the interior of the park, you know, and I'm including Caracol also and Tapper Camp, which are posts also manned by rangers and BDF and police. And then we also have the Cebo Chico. Each of these posts on a daily basis would have between 8 and 10 persons. So that'll be, you know, over 70 persons, boots on the ground daily. But like Mr. Popper was saying, the Chiquibul is very large. I always like to mention, I used to work at Half Moon Key, and we used to climb the lighthouse, Moon Key, and you just spin around with your binoculars and you see your park. If there is a poacher in one corner, you can see him and just come down, take your little boat, go there and see him, speak to him, and they're Belizeans. In the case of the Chiquibul, you might see 100 feet away from you. And if you meet someone, likely you don't know who he is and might have a weapon on you. So that makes it complicated in the Chiquibul. But what has helped us in the Chiquibul is strategy. Being strategic, and also the numbers are small. I was saying the other day we only have 18 rangers. Out of this number that I mentioned, 18 would be rangers, but there's always only 12 of those rangers working because a team of 6 would be at home taking a rest. But being strategic is important, and I think most important than just writing a strategy or a plan is being committed. I think that is key when it comes to Friends for Conservation and Development. Commitment, training people, disciplining people to want to do it, to believe in what they do. That is important. And I think that is also important for the public of Belize to know that they also have a commitment, right? The Chiquibul is for everyone to enjoy, but it's also for everyone to have that commitment to protect. So we do have at this time I could say that we still have low numbers, even though we are like as much strategic as we can, but you still want to have a number that I would say call it the magic number, right? And if we would have 36 rangers, to say double the amount that we have right now, I think we would be able to operate much better. Of course, that requires a lot of funding. We hope to raise these funds. People, we need to create the awareness. People need to understand, and we need these people out there on the ground. Particularly with fires, with fires, it's fighting fire is hard. Mm-hmm. You better want to prepare a year by educating people to be careful about fires than train 20 people to go and fight fires, because fighting a fire is a really uphill battle, always, no matter what you think, what you try. And in the Chiquibul, there's no roads and there's no water. How do you get equipment in there? So I could say then that, our numbers when it comes to the challenges, are little, the numbers become little.
And it is important to note that the rangers that you've spoken of, 12 that are on duty at one time, would be working very closely with the Belize Defense Force on some of those patrols. Major Pop, from your point of view, and I know you were alluding to it earlier, understanding that at least 27 miles of the Chiquibul shares a border with Guatemala, the role of the BDF becomes even more important, because it's not just being a matter of environmental protection, but also national security. Can you expand on that?
Right. As I said, while we understand the mandate of the FCD, we're driven by directives from the Ministry of National Defense in our case, and of course the entire perspective of the government of Belize as it pertains to the Guatemalan claim. And how that plays out is that we are the front line that balances these two requirements. I can speak to a particular example, or some examples, where we have detained encroachers, illegal peasants, and the directive or direction from our hires that for us to ensure that the CBMs stay alive and that we show good faith, at least to appeal to the innate human qualities of the Guatemalan people, that we are acting in good faith, we release them at the border. And of course, this is a contrarian approach from the perspective of the FCD. And that is where one of the key challenges, right, is exposed, because we have to balance it. We have to balance the overall perspective of the government in terms of national defense, security, but also that we try to appease or at least try to facilitate the enforcement of the mandates of FCD. But I must mention too that that show of good faith that we have done over many years, it has not really resulted in the expectation that we wanted to achieve. There's not so much of a visible effort from our counterparts or the government of Guatemala to at least dissuade its peoples from coming over to continue these unabated illegal incursions. While these are political realities, we understand, and through documentation, through maintaining trends and histories of these activities, we have now changed our approach, that we are a little bit more proactive. And whenever these activities are discovered as contrary to humanitarian laws as they may appear, our approach to these things now are that we will destroy them, dismantle them, or relocate whatever we have to. And this is really evidenced in the last major operation that we did, even under COVID restrictions last year, between July and August, where we destroyed some 25 OAS verified fence lines, of course, working hand in hand with FCD. And I think that was a major achievement for us. And as it is right now, and of course, a bit from the results of the fire, although it's unfortunate, I think that we can say that the border is a little bit more free of these encroachments. Of course, they're not going to stop. They're not going to take a break. So we have to continue being proactive and address them as they arise.
You brought up some key points that I'm going to come back to, but I do want to get Dr. K back in, because there is, of course, the Chiquibul Mountain Pine Ridge Caracol Complex Sustainable Development Plan. Very lengthy name there, which means that there must be much work involved, Dr. K. But from your perspective, I think it's understanding how the implementation of this Sustainable Development Plan will help to combat some of the existing threats.
Yes, thank you, Marlene. The Sustainable Development Plan that was developed for the Chiquibul Mountain Pine Ridge and Caracol Complex is really a master plan. It's really setting a vision where the idea is really to have vibrant and healthy ecosystems that are supported by and support, a prosperous economy, thriving local communities. And there's a lot of good work, as we are now presenting today, that has been done. But one of the main things with the plan is to try and bring a much more coordinated and integrated approach to the management of the area, because these areas don't operate in and of themselves. For example, if you think about the Chiquibul National Park, there's threats that are coming in, for example, from the Vaca Forest Reserve side. There is also things that are happening in the Mountain Pine Ridge related to fires that may affect the neighboring protected areas. So the whole idea of this plan is to bring much more integration and coordination to our approach. And in terms of implementation, it's to actually declare the area a protected landscape, instead of we normally, we just have these individual protected areas. One is a forest reserve, one is a national park, one is an archaeological reserve. The idea here now is we have a protected landscape, and you have zones that are managed for their specific purposes. Our Caracol is an archaeological site that's not going to change. But to do it with a vision where we're all working towards a much more holistic picture. And in terms of threats, that should really help us to have a much more concerted effort that integrates not just enforcement, but the aspect of the livelihoods from our side, and also potentially addresses some of the cross-border issues, because listening to the conversation previously, and I wanted to make sure that I bring this point, and it's that we've been talking about enforcement boots on the ground, and that the data shows that has worked. More conservation posts, the concerted effort of the BDF and FCD has worked. We have less deforestation. We have an improvement in the scarlet macaque conditions. So this is, the data and the evidence shows that it's working. but it doesn't mean that enforcement by itself can stop what is happening. And then that's the part where the human dimension comes in. So management isn't just about boots on the ground and enforcement, but we also have to look at the human aspect of it. And the reality is that across the border, those communities are really poor. I mean, I keep on repeating this, but would we choose to go sometimes barefoot, not even a proper shoe, in the middle of the night to try and extract a log or to go look for shate or scarlet macaws? You don't sort of, that's not like, oh, we're going on an adventure. It's like we need to feed ourselves. So I think that one of the remarkable things about FCD is that they have recognized that, this presence part is key. And this is what we can do immediately. But over the long term, we have to figure out a way to reach out to those communities across that most impact us. Because if they are doing things better, if they have more skills, then the idea is that they don't have to enter the park to just take, but they have options for livelihoods that are more sustainable. And so I think with the idea with the plan is to have that integration and coordination, so we don't focus on any one aspect, but integrate all the various aspects that have to be brought into an efficient management system.
Very, very critical point there. And that's one I want to pick up back on with you and the other panelists. But before we move over to collaboration opportunities that exist outside of Belize, let's keep it local for a moment. When you talk about creating a preserved landscape, one of the ongoing projects is the pavement of the Caracol Road. I want to get from your perspective if you foresee any particular threat.
Having a paved road is certainly going to assist FCD. For example, right now the wear and tear on their vehicles is so incredible. I mean, that's why tourism operations don't even want to go to Caracol and prefer to go to Tikal, because that road is much better. So it will definitely save FCD a lot of resources, having a road where they can respond fast, where the wear and tear on your vehicles is not so bad, and they are allowed to do more with those resources. But it also means that now there is going to be more access. And so if we're not vigilant and don't put the control posts and the systems in place, once people gain access to that road somehow, then it also gives them access, right? And so I think those are some of the concerns related to the opening of the road. Other people, when we were developing the plan, are concerned about things like speeding. Right now that area is shared. Various management activities are taking place, including, for example, logging, not in the national park, but in the forest reserve. So those trucks come down and use the road. People are worried about people speeding and hitting wildlife. So concerns for biodiversity. And I think overall, in terms of the engineering, this area is super sensitive when it comes to the distribution of water and all these little streams. And if you've traveled that Mountain Pine Ridge Road in the wet season, you know that this area is just, full of all of those connections with water. And so the engineering has to, we have to make sure that it's engineering that's not going to affect the flows and the sedimentation and all those other things related to the whole function of that complex as a watershed.
Mm-hmm. And so I'd imagine it will then involve, Derek, if you want to chime in, just having the management and the education, the ongoing education, continue on this side of the border, especially as you have more persons being introduced into the area.
Yeah, I also want to answer to a question from the audience about poaching. Mm-hmm. And about our experience in terms of poaching of either timber or wildlife. With binational effort, to arrest this situation. yeah, we have seen in the, let's say, last 5 years that the poaching is increasing. Rosewood has been one of those timber trees or precious wood that has been poached, illegally harvested in the Chiquibul. A lot of that happens in the southern part of the Chiquibul, which borders with the Columbia River Forest Reserve. So that is on the other side of the Maya Divide. The Chiquibul actually goes across the Maya Divide in that southern part there of the Coyote District. We have had a committee that meets and communicates, via the clouds and to address the poaching, and it does help. It does help because we are able to communicate from this side. What are the things that we would want the community people to know across, or what is happening here. So our counterparts would put on like radio spots or different awareness, on radio, whatever media they can, or meet with community members to create that awareness about poaching. Scarlet macaw, and of course the mahogany, right? So last year, the authorities, the rangers, were able to arrest, one poacher, and well, I hope this proves that yes, this is happening, and it's a problem because if we poach all our animals, we'll have an empty forest, and so we cannot allow that to continue. Yeah, but with Asociación Balam is where we work across in Guatemala and also with the Wildlife Conservation Society, curbing, those problems along the border.
Yeah. And I guess that's one of the examples, as you have all noted, that being able to mitigate or to address the current threats cannot be done exclusively by FCD or those on this side of the border. How important are binational efforts in being able to mitigate the threats?
Yeah, we cannot do it alone. Again, like we cannot do it alone here. A lot of the poaching, I think I don't know, it's probably easier to do it from across the border. In the recent years, we have seen on the Guatemalan media of arrests of parrots, of different species, scarlet macaws, and also of timber, rosewood. It is important. It is important that binational program is maintained. It has been good. It has been good over the past 10 years, and and even with the communities, I think we are making that getting close to them and creating more that relationship. But again, like Dr. K was saying, it's a choice between, for them, it's like, you protect a tree or you cut that tree to feed your family. And that is the problem, and it does require a lot of effort from governments. On the other side, from the Guatemalan government. Yeah. So for us, I think that the biggest threat that we have in the Chiquibul right now is actually from the communities along the border. But of course, we also have our own threats, in the Chiquibul. The road that we were saying, the Caracol Road, there's already hunting, even from the workers there. working on the road, they are hunting, and we have tried to like mitigate that by speaking to them, creating awareness. Look, this is a national park or it's a forest reserve, because Pine Ridge is still a forest reserve, not within our jurisdiction. But if we see hunters, we still tell them, look, please do not hunt here, because it's a wildlife. We are building a road so that tourists can come and see, and if we hunt them now, what will they see then? The concessionaires in the Chiquibul, we need their support. We need their support. We have to get to different areas of the Chiquibul, and it is important that they come together with us. If we cannot reach to those areas, then we cannot protect the Chiquibul.
Dr. K, I see you nodding along when he speaks of the wildlife and the hunters. Any thoughts there?
Just that overall, as I said, we do have to put the checks and balances. Roads are just right now, for example, there's a little gate that you pass, but there's other ways to get in. You know what I mean? It's not like it has a fence.
Yeah.
So people do get creative in the ways that they can go and extract. And that is something that happens. And also, a lot of people will say, well, if people from across the border are taking, why can't we take, And so these are the types of things that I think through much more integrated and coordinated management, the various organizations, FCD with the government, the BDF, niche, everybody that's involved. If you have a platform and a mandate that just, it means you have to plan together. And I think in Belize, one of the things that I've always seen in terms of coordination is we're good at really forming these working groups, but the ownership sometimes is not there. So if it's a legal board, I believe that Minister Habib mentioned forming the Chiquibul Landscape Conservation Trust. If it's something like that, where there's a formal mechanism where those partners have to come together, then we can tackle even the issues with wildlife, for example, in a much more holistic fashion, rather than, okay, you're the forest department and you're the only one you need to deal with that. You're FCD and you need to deal with that portion. But instead, how can we have a much more holistic approach to each of these things? And I think that is what the plan is trying to do, is to bring that integration and coordination so we don't work in silos, which it's a natural tendency, I think, for organizations and in general. We tend to get caught up in our own little worlds and our own priorities. But if it's something where we have a mandate that we must look after this complex together and we must plan together and execute together, I think we are going to be ahead.
Yeah. And before, we're running into the final minutes of the panel discussion, but before we get there, just so we are sure to ventilate the issue thoroughly, the threats to the watershed. I believe in the opening video, they spoke of the Chiquibul providing, being the main water source for 40% of Belizeans. That's a very important number to start off from. And when you use the examples of the threats that Derek outlined, from gold panning activities to the residual effects of forest fires, agricultural activities, cattle ranching, and even the poachers who may live and therefore have all their bodily functions there, the areas where they stay. You're looking at all of this then posing that risk to the 40% of Belizeans who rely on it. So let's look at that particular threat in this moment.
Yes, absolutely pivotal. And I hope that, everyone that's listening understands that, yes, if this area, and it's not just the Chiquibul, actually, it's the whole complex. And I want to emphasize that, because this symposium is about the Chiquibul, and we're talking about FCD's work, but that was the whole idea with the plan, to also bring attention to the fact, like, the mountain pine ridge feeds other rivers. So basically, the entire area is at risk. And when we look at threats, you can look at it in terms of levels. The absolute worst thing that could happen is when you clear cut, right? That means that your ability to to have plants sort of, let out vapor at night and then have condensation come back down, which means rain. And so that capture, that watershed function where the forest is acting as the part that captures the water. Once you get rid of the forest, then you lose that ability. So that's like the absolute worst, right? Then we can look at it in different steps. The next thing is degradation. When we have a fire may not necessarily get rid of everything, but there's a lot that's released. Nutrient pulses, you release carbon, you're introducing other things into the system, you start creating erosion and siltation, and all of that will eventually travel down, which is going to affect how the rivers are themselves functioning. And then we can look at things like gold panning. That is really bad because in a lot of these efforts with gold, there are toxic chemicals involved. With the panning process, normally things like mercury would be used to attract the gold and get it out of the material that's being dredged or dug up from the riverbed. So apart from the siltation and all that disruption, you might introduce something like mercury into the system, which then is going to accumulate in the fish and the other organisms that eventually we are going to eat, and so it's sort of, all of the threats are important, but they're sort of different levels of importance. And so we do have to look at them in a cumulative fashion rather than saying it's one thing. And so there's many potential threats, but definitely deforestation, degradation, the potential introduction of, like I say, toxic chemicals and other things through activities like gold panning, they're of serious concern. And then when we hear of things, for example, like in the Chiquibul, we don't as much have this problem as in the Mountain Pine Ridge, where we've heard the news of the lands, that have gone to private interest. Once you have private interest in some of those lands, it may not necessarily go with your goals of conserving the watershed because you start altering those lands. So all of those just accumulate, and we need to again be able to look at them in a holistic fashion to really understand what is a threat. But it's big for Belize because, as you say, 40% of the population and more when you consider beyond the Chiquibul.
Yeah. And Major Pop, before we start to round off and get the closing statement from all of you, just let's look at today. We're having this symposium virtually. So COVID-19 and the pandemic has changed so much about our everyday movements. Has it in any way lessened the amount of incursions that you've seen or the threats that you have noted at the Chiquibul?
I don't think the threats decreased dramatically because of COVID. I think our efforts, as I said, as I alluded to, the Operation Wire Slipper that we conducted last year, I think that had more an impact on the levels of threats that we're seeing. And also, I think that we have evolved a little bit in understanding the importance of conservation, the importance of the presence that we maintain at the borders. So I think in collaboration with FCD, our guys on the ground are doing a little bit more deterrence patrols, discouraging people from coming across. And of course, at the height of the COVID pandemic last year, we had a directive in place that anybody who was caught automatically went to prison. And as long as we had resources to extract these detainees, that would have been the consequence for them. So it became a little bit more challenging for them. As soon as we met them, they were automatically incarcerated. So maybe in a sense, we can probably argue that because of those directives based on the height of the COVID, probably lessened a little bit. But now that we do not have those in place, we just have to rely on our more concerted effort to discover these illegal activities, deal with these activities as they arise. So overall, I think we're doing far better compared to previous years. And as I said, we have back in the years past, we used to probably depend a lot on accumulating various activities in certain areas. Then we would plan major operations, which takes a drastic amount of resources before we can launch. So what we're doing now is that we're being a little bit more proactive. As soon as we discover something illegal, we have a process where it's verified. There are clearly encroachments, illegal encroachments inside of Belize. Once those are verified through an OS verification process, then we deal with them as it is. We don't wait for them to accumulate. We deal with them on the spot. So that is a bit more proactive approach that we're taking. And I think that at some point, I mean, it's not going to stop, but it is something that we have to take for what it is, and that these are threats to our daily lives as Belizeans.
Yeah. Well, I thank you, all three panelists, for shedding some light on the ongoing threats within the Chiquibul. I was about to give you a moment to close off, but we do have the question and answer segment coming up where these panelists will return to the conversation along with the Executive Director of FCD, Rafael Manzanero. So we'll be able to summarize at that point. But this portion of outlining the existing threats to Chiquibul comes to a close. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys in just a few when we get to the questions of our attendees and or online viewers.
Thank you, Marlene.
Thank you.
And so before we move into our keynote address for this afternoon, as I mentioned earlier, we are very happy. The organizers have been able to put together little introductions from team members of the FCD. And so let's take a look at one of those now.
Hi, I'm Wendy Garcia at the Chiquibul Caverns, and this is the Chiquibul Symposium 2021.
All right, there you have it. One more reason to get to the Chiquibul so that you can join, you can get to the caverns as Wendy just showed us. So once again, that is the longest and largest cave system network in Belize. Now we move forward with our keynote address for this afternoon, and that's by Prime Minister Honorable John Briceño.
Greetings. I have and always will believe that the work of FCD is noble. I know that your efforts are in line with that of my government as it relates to the protection, restoration, and promotion of the sustainable use of our natural forest ecosystems. And so for me, this is a significant partnership. On a personal note, allow me to reminisce about my own Chiquibul experience when I walked with Rafael and his team through the Chiquibul to Puente Natural. It was truly a great experience. The theme chosen for this symposium, Restoring a National Patrimony, comes amidst our nation's greatest challenge in a century, and for sure, the greatest challenge since independence. The COVID-19 virus has affected us in such a profound way that there is no part of our national development that has not been affected. For sure, our national patrimony, indeed our national psyche, has been in large measures shaken and diminished. Yet we as a people are optimistic and my government forward-thinking. And so we welcome this event, and more so, the outcomes that will result from your work. The Chiquibul Maya Mountain Complex represents the core of our nation's cultural, natural, and economic wealth. This symposium then provides an opportunity to emphasize the many threats, challenges, and opportunities which exist and can be explored for restoring and maintaining the integrity of this key biodiversity area within the Mesoamerican region. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud that Belize serves as a global model in the areas of biodiversity and protected areas management. I'm immensely proud that many of the targets and vision for protected areas documented within the first iteration of our National Protected Areas Policy and System Plan were identified and championed under my tenure as Minister of the Ministry of Natural Resources in 2005. These visionary goals for protected areas identified by the PUP in 2005 are again at the forefront of Plan Belize. They are critical factors for supporting the social and economic recovery and resilience of Belize. In Latin America and the Caribbean, countries have set aside on average 20% of their lands as protected areas. Our goal is to set aside over 36% of our land for conservation of biodiversity. Given our small size, this is indeed nothing short of impressive. But as we do our part in maintaining and restoring these ecosystems, we must all remain focused on the true purpose for setting aside these lands for conservation. It is not one of locking away these resources, but one of ensuring that these areas are maintained and are able to contribute in perpetuity for the well-being of our people. Aside from serving as habitat for biodiversity, Belize's protected areas are a major source of natural capital, contributing millions of dollars in ecosystem-derived goods and services on an annual basis. Much of our industries are dependent on these managed resources. It is well known and has been documented that approximately 70% of visitors to Belize visit our protected areas during their stay, with direct tourism contribution exceeding $510 million annually. Additional nature-based production industries such as forestry, fishing, and agriculture continue to serve as primary GDP earners. Areas such as the Chiquibul have also demonstrated their effectiveness in providing services critical to the social well-being of our people. 39 watersheds provide water security for people across 55% of the total land mass of Belize and provide energy and hydroelectric power required for our day-to-day activities. Notwithstanding this contribution to socio-economic growth, resources for management of sites are often limited and have hindered their sustainable management and development. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has further strained protected areas management by limiting visitation and sustainable productive activities within these sites. Anyone who has worked within the environmental field knows that the financial needs of our protected areas system vastly exceeded the limited funding available to invest in conservation. Assessments have shown that the financial gap for an optimum level of protected areas management is estimated at $40 million annually. It is also clear that the current level of investment in protected areas is even more difficult to maintain as we grapple to provide the critical needs being demanded by the electorate and citizens in the face of this pandemic. In the face of these challenges, we must join efforts and collaborate to protect our natural assets. My government is determined to set up the frameworks, legislation, and opportunities for our people and economy to evolve and prosper within a changing and dynamic environment. We are committed to doing our best to improve protected areas administration, governance, coordination, and enforcement. We also recognize that research, monitoring, and proper planning is integral to improving management of our resources. As stated in Plan Belize, we will roll out an aggressive reforestation program, as well as facilitating sustainable rural concessions in areas of least negative impact to biodiversity and which will be held by members of our communities. We will support community-based organizations in value-adding and entry into niche markets for nature-based products, which will create jobs for our people, as well as reduce poverty. We also commit to introducing new surveillance technology to assist in the daunting and tireless task of patrolling and manning of our Chiquibul border against foreign incursions and pillaging of our resources. We have also witnessed the sale and pirating of our most pristine and critical resources. Again, my commitment is to ensure that we protect and recover these lands with high intrinsic value, such as the Bald Hills in the Mountain Pine Ridge, which belongs to the people of Belize and not to land-grabbing ministers, their cronies, and other associates. Considering the existing and increasing constraints on government's annual budgets, it is all about strategically leveraging funding from facilities such as the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environmental Facility, and the Food and Agriculture Organization via partnerships with institutions like the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center and the Biodiversity Finance Initiative, to name a few. As we do our best to secure the millions needed to address both social and environmental needs, let us no longer shy away from entering partnerships with the private sector to assist us in bridging our financial gap. This will be done while ensuring that the financial instruments and accountability features are put in place to guide these opportunities. I am certain that if win-win opportunities are identified, that the private sector will consider increasing investments in nature-based enterprises which provide both a financial and environmental return. I am fully aware that we must do a better job at coordinating amongst relevant ministries and sectors. Sustainable management of our resources cannot be the preoccupation of only the government or the Ministry of Sustainable Development or the Blue Economy. Our NGO partners must continue their efforts which I commend and applaud, for my government fully understands that the government of Belize cannot do it alone. The board and staff of FCD have worked tirelessly for over 21 years to ensure that the integrity of the Chiquibul is maintained. They do this in the face of mounting threats to both human and physical resources and in an environment with great financial limitations. FCD has shown us what perseverance and dedication is all about. To Rafael and the entire team, I say that you are not alone. We hear you. This government is committed to doing our part in improving the management of Chiquibul and the greater Chiquibul landscape. Congratulations, and thanks for the impressive work done throughout the years and on the organizing of yet another great symposium. To everyone who will present a paper, a speech, or those who log on to share and be informed, thank you for your contribution. Make good decisions, and please keep safe.
And there you heard from the Prime Minister of Belize, Honorable John Briceño. And we are very grateful to have heard his own personal experience when he visited the Chiquibul. And I'm sure when Rafael Manzanero, the Executive Director for FCD, joins us later, he will extend that invitation to all of you who are tuned in, whether through the webinar, if you're watching online, if you're watching on television. This gives me an opportunity again to say thank you to our sponsors, those who allowed for today's event to take place. And that was through the help of the U.S. Department of the Interior and the Wildlife Conservation Society, Natural Light Production, Millennial Studios, and Tony Rath Photography for the graphics, video production, and artwork, Idea Lab Studios for the technical coordination of the symposium, and the virtual platform that we're using with the kind assistance of Nicole Usher Solano. And a very big thank you to the media who collaborated with FCD for this event, Great Belize Television, Channel 7, Creme Television, and Love TV. Once again, to all of you who are tuned in, allow me to introduce you to another member of the team of FCD. We introduce you to Lenny Gentle, who is an FCD naturalist and one of the founding young members who raised the alarm and awareness on the Chiquibul.
Hi, I am an FCD naturalist. I am in the Vaca Forest buffer zone to the Chiquibul, and this is the Chiquibul Symposium 2021.
All right. So we didn't see his face, but we did hear him at least. We'll get that to you a bit later on. And keeping things moving, one of the things that is important to be able to highlight in the symposium is that much like the Prime Minister just mentioned, that it is a collaborative effort, the work that is ongoing in the Chiquibul and in preserving some of the natural jewels that we've been blessed with. There are a number of partner organizations that work along with and advocate along with conservation entities like the FCD. And they're going to be sharing their testimonials, their own personal experience as to how they have worked along with the organization, why the work of the organization is important. And so our first testimonial is going to be from the president of the Belize Tourism Industry Association. And he speaks of the value of the Chiquibul and how important it is to the tourism industry. So let's hear from Stuart Crone.
First of all, tourism is the country's biggest industry. It's our most important earner of foreign exchange. So anytime you're talking about tourism, you're really talking about the entire economy of Belize. Where Chiquibul comes in, it's such a large and critical area. And because our tourism in Belize is nature-based tourism, Chiquibul really, when you're talking about this part of the country, you're talking about the future of tourism. So we've got to think in the long term. When you have an asset that is so valuable as this particular natural asset, you've got to take care of it. So it's not the kind of thing that you make decisions about this kind of place lightly. You don't just do things on the spur of the moment. It takes planning. It takes a lot of thinking. But the way we see it in the tourism industry is that this is the kind of planning that in the past has been lacking, but sometimes we learned from our past mistakes, and this time we've got to get it right. And so the, you know, with FCD being at the forefront of conservation in this area, it's really time for the tourism industry to sit down with the environmental parties and try and make a plan that makes sense. And when I say make sense, ultimately, when you're exploiting this resource, it has to be used for the benefit of Belize and Belizeans. So this practice that is developed over the years with protected areas, that little by little they get de-reserved and parcels of land get given out, and the next thing you know, there's no more protected area, and it's all just a lot of small parcels that people are doing this and that with no coordination. So it's important for us to get it right, and we have the resources, we have the brains to do it, and I think the tourism industry is 100% behind the efforts to develop the Chiquibul in a conscious manner. From a tourism point of view, the Chiquibul is almost an endless resource. In fact, from what I gather, the major attractions in Chiquibul, probably maybe only 10% of the area has even been lightly explored. So when you talk about, for example, caves, so maybe there's a half dozen major caves. And when we say major, we mean world-class caves that have already been discovered here. But if there's 10 caves discovered, there's probably 100 or 500 caves that haven't been discovered and probably will not be discovered in 5 lifetimes. You add to the caves, just look at Caracol, one of the most important Maya sites, not just in Belize, but in the entire ancient Maya world. The beauty of Caracol, sure, you've got the monumental architecture, but the beauty of Caracol is that it's not like Chichen Itza or Tikal, where you can go to those places and there's 5,000 people crawling up and down the temples. Even if Caracol, you could quadruple or quintuple the number of people visiting, and you would still feel like you're the only one there. That's the beauty of Caracol. And that's really the beauty of many ancient Maya sites in Belize. You know, so besides the caves, Caracol, and ancient Maya sites that may not have been discovered yet, you've got the rivers, the creeks. They're beautiful, pure water. And you know, there's nothing like jumping in a beautiful freshwater stream. I live near the sea, and I love the sea, but there's a difference. It's a great contrast, and the visitation to this area is so low. Again, the potential there is just amazing.
Thank you very much. That was Stuart Crone, the president of the Belize Tourism Industry Association, really helping to tie in there how the importance of safeguarding the protected areas, including Chiquibul, is such an important part of looking at our tourism product as well. And it must be noted that the National Sustainable Tourism Master Plan does recognize the Chiquibul Forest as a key area of focus. Now, for those of you who were paying attention during the panel discussion, or if you're just joining us, I think the panelists definitely highlighted just how the importance of the Chiquibul as a watershed is important for all of us across the country. And one organization or one association that knows that very well is the Cayo Watershed Conservation Association. So Garfield Murillo is going to talk about the significance of the forest and how it contributes towards clean, safe water resource that is provided to so many Belizeans.
Pleasant good morning to one and all. My name is Garfield Murillo, president of the Cayo Watershed Conservation Alliance. CWCA is located in Benquevejo del Carmen, Cayo District, Belize. Our primary work ethics is to conserve and preserve our watershed systems throughout Belize through sustainable environmental conservation methods and practices. These practices are promoted by means of data collection, reforestation, ecosystem monitoring, and watershed ecology advocating, education in our communities and educational institutions. Over the past several decades, we have seen the increased effects of wrong human practices taking hold on the natural ecosystem of the Chiquibul. This is mainly caused by illegal gold panning, poaching, deforestation, and illegal milpa farming. These illegal activities have left a devastating impact on the Chiquibul ecosystem. It is evident that over the past 30+ years, more than 4,931 hectare-acres have been cleared, cutted, destroying the pristine jungle canopy along the western border of the Chiquibul and observing a decrease in the population of wild game and exotic birds being threatened by extinction. Also, several of our water headwaters catchment in the upper region of the Chiquibul has come under attack and is currently being contaminated by the practice of illegal gold panning. These are a result of illegal incursions of a transboundary nature to the Chiquibul National Park for its lucrative natural resources. This highly illustrates the critical need to support our efforts to conserve and protect the Chiquibul. The Chiquibul headwaters is an important factor to the sustainable livelihood of over 42+ communities downstream. Originating along the main divide region in the Chiquibul, river flows across the southwestern flank of the dense upper elevation of the Chiquibul. It then flows into Guatemala, where it joins the Mopan River, passing through several villages before re-entering Belize in Arenal and Garbots Fall in Benquevejo del Carmen. The Mopan River then connects with the Macal River in Branchmouth area of Santa Familia village, where it forms the Belize River. This watershed system has a direct impact on the daily livelihood of approximately 144,000 plus individuals living along these rivers before it is deposited into the Caribbean Sea in Belize City. Despite the increased growth of climate change and wrong human practices, it is very essential for us to conserve and protect our water resources for future generations to come. In conclusion, it is also important to bear in mind that water is a key element to the sustainability of life. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Garfield, for sharing that perspective from the Cayo Watershed Conservation Association. And next up, we're going to hear from the Director of Wildlife Conservation Society Program in Guatemala. The WCS program centers most of its work in the Maya Biosphere Reserve, which involves collaboration with border communities. And Rowan has been involved in various binational efforts with FCD, primarily in the protection of the scarlet macaws and addressing illegal wildlife trafficking. So let's hear from Mr. Rowan Balas.
Thank you to Friends for Conservation Development, Rafael Manzanero, and all our colleagues in Belize for the opportunity to present on the critical need to conserve the forests and biodiversity of Chiquibul's massif. Chiquibul is a key part of the trinational Maya forest, one of Mesoamerica's 5 biggest remaining forests. If we look at a map of the human footprint of Mesoamerica and changes over a 15-year period between 2000 and 2015, we can see that the last of the wild areas, the areas least impacted by human presence, decreased by 25% over that period in this trinational Selva Maya. If we look at the scale of the Maya forest and the changes per each country, Mexico had the greatest decrease with 29%, a 22% decrease was registered in Guatemala, and in Belize, the good news was the last of the wild only decreased by 17%. Belize's Chiquibul Forest remains under threat, but it's an exceptional reservoir for biodiversity, and it's important to protect the jaguars, white-lipped peccaries, monkeys, deer, and tapir therein. But if we look at a specific taxon of birds and eBird registries across Belize, we can see a hotspot of birding activity in registries, sometimes over 500 species registered in a quadrant in that part of the Chiquibul Maya forest. Specific species like the harpy eagle are registered almost uniquely in the Chiquibul Forest of Belize. And the keel-billed mountain is another excellent example of the endemic biodiversity in that region of Belize. There's also a shared natural patrimony with Guatemala and with Mexico, represented by the scarlet macaw. Recently, we've seen as many as 30 birds arriving to the central area of Petén called El Chal. We suspect these birds may be coming from Belize, and they may even be migrating into Mexico. But there are other reasons to conserve the important biodiversity of the Chiquibul Massif. One of the key reasons is ecosystem services and water. To date, 65% of the water from the Guatemalan Chiquibul drains into Belize. And still, as of 2010, about half of the watersheds in Guatemalan Chiquibul maintain their ecological integrity. We're still in time to restore those ecosystems and help maintain the quality of the water that flows through Belize. But this water all flows downstream. So one of the other key reasons to maintain the integrity of the Chiquibul Massif is the survival of Belize's barrier reef, the marine biodiversity therein, and the income from tourism that's generated for the country of Belize. So what are we doing as WCS here in Guatemala and in Belize to support the Belizean Chiquibul? One of our key activities as partners is working on the prosecution of wildlife trafficking in the Guatemala and Belize adjacency zone. Our partners, the Environmental Justice Forum of Petén, Asociación Balam, have been working with the support of the U.S. Department of Interior and DEFRA from the United Kingdom to map scarlet macaw trafficking networks, exchange information with our partners in Belize about trafficking, raise awareness and obtain support from Guatemalan authorities. This has led to arrests and prosecutions in the recent years with 9 arrests and 6 sentences, 3 of which are in process. And we've also been supporting FCD's field presence and biological monitoring activities. Our national partner Balam has been working on patrolling and fire prevention in the Guatemalan areas, especially after last year's severe fires that entered into Belize, working on public participation, supporting trans-frontier collaboration amongst indigenous organizations, and working hard to build sustainable livelihoods with rural communities. They've also been very successful at leveraging new financial resources for the Guatemalan Chiquibul. In conclusion, Guatemalan support for the Chiquibul Forest and for the Chiquibul Massif of Belize is growing. We thank FCD and all our colleagues in Belize for the opportunity to participate. We wish you the best in all of your work in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rowan, for sharing that perspective and really being able to hone in on some of the areas or some of the reasons why binational efforts are so important, where we may put boundaries in place when it comes to nature, it doesn't exist. So moving forward with our final testimonial, we've talked about how the importance of the Chiquibul and preserving what is there is important to tourism and important to a watershed and important to wildlife. It's also a delicate balance with development. And so our final testimonial will be looking at the development perspective, that is, when we look at the Chiquibul being the largest catchment area for rainfall in the country and how critical that is to hydroelectric energy generation. We'll have Lin Young of Bicol sharing his perspective on that.
The Chiquibul Forest is a wonderland of pristine jungle and forests with unmatched biodiversity in our country and even in our region. This vast landscape of untold beauty and natural treasures is also a repository of valuable natural resources, including precious metals, minerals, timber, and other forest products. Given their high monetary value, these resources are a blessing for us, but we are challenged to protect them from persons looking to illegally extract our resources without regard for future sustainability. Even the exotic wildlife have not escaped the reach of illegal poachers who seek to satisfy the demand of unscrupulous collectors around the world. While the direct monetary value of these natural resources are readily recognized, we must also realize the even greater value of the ecological services that this vast watershed provides. A healthy ecological system such as the Chiquibul purifies our air, cleans our water, maintains the soil, helps to regulate the climate, recycles nutrients, and even provides us with food and medicines. These are all critical factors that, if managed responsibly, will help ensure that development of our nation progresses in a sustainable manner that will be beneficial for all. Perhaps the most valuable ecosystem service provided to us by the Chiquibul is that of a clean and consistent supply of fresh water. The Belize River is the longest river in Belize. Its catchment drains more than 1/4 of the country and contains and provides services to over 45% of our population. It is a vital source of water for drinking and other domestic uses for our people, in addition to the complex arrays of ecosystems, habitats, and wildlife that are supported by its life-giving waters. The source of this main artery of fresh water is the majestic Chiquibul Forest, which is where the headwaters of the Macal River originate. This source is what has allowed everything downstream, natural and man-made, to sprout, develop, and blossom. Without it, everything would quite literally dry up. In addition to being the largest source of fresh water in Belize, the mighty Macal River provides us with yet another essential service without which life as we know it would be very different: electricity. The energy contained in the flowing waters of the Macal is enough to power 45% of our entire country using a clean, renewable resource. For the past 25 years, hydroelectricity has been a pillar of our energy infrastructure, serving as a consistent, stable, and cheap source of electricity supply. It has allowed Belize a measure of energy independence and has proven that clean, renewable energy is a viable option and well worth the investment. It is clear then that any attack on this lifeline should be considered a very grave threat to the very existence of countless natural and man-made communities that depend on this never-ending flow of clean and healthy water. Indeed, on the broader national scale, the destruction of the Chiquibul Forest and watershed would manifest disastrous consequences. If the health, vigor, and robustness of the Macal and Belize rivers will deteriorate, so would our energy generation sector, our agricultural sector, our tourism sector, and many other commercial and subsistence activities that have been built around the services provided by these main waterways. Fortunately for us, the Chiquibul is still largely pristine and healthy, and we still have a good opportunity to ensure that this most important watershed remains intact for generations to come. The plethora of biodiversity contained within the Chiquibul serves as a key indicator of the good health of this ecosystem, and this is something that we should make every effort to preserve. By doing our part to support and preserve the Chiquibul, we are also supporting and preserving our way of life. And we are supporting and preserving for our children something that is becoming increasingly rare: an untouched natural world teeming with the most diverse forms of life.
And thank you very much for that testimonial, Lynn Young. And it definitely broadens your perspective beyond talking about just the environmental role that the Chiquibul plays, but how it can factor into many different aspects. So moving forward, we will introduce you to another team member of Friends for Conservation and Development. And now I'd like you to meet Demary Harris, who has a very unique perspective as he says hello to everyone here at the symposium.
Hi, I'm a park ranger. I'm on the highest point in Belize. This is Chiquibul Symposium 2021.
All right, pop quiz time. So what would that be, the highest point? We'll see if anybody gets it right in the responses. And if you haven't been able to get to it as yet, somebody will say it on the Facebook Live. The highest point, which would be Doyle's Delight. And moving forward, when we talk about the work of the Chiquibul, we must be the work of the FCD, Friends for Conservation and Development. We know that the dedicated team there has done all that they can to ensure that the wider public is always up to date with what is taking place, from progress that's made to challenges that may arise. And Rafael Manzanero, as the executive director, has made every effort to ensure that Belizeans across the country know what is taking place within this protected area. And so we are actually going to hear from Rafael now. So with all that we have heard this morning, talking about the existing threats to the Chiquibul, hearing from the partner agencies about the importance of preserving this area, Rafael will now talk to us about the actions that need to be taken. So this is the executive director of Friends for Conservation and Development, Rafael Manzanero, with the Chiquibul call to action.
Good afternoon to all of you nationally and internationally. First, I want to thank you for all the support that you have been able to give us over the many years of our work in the protection of the Chiquibul Forest. Our efforts have certainly paid off, and that is all due to our friends like you, our supporters, our donors, our funders. So thanks so much for that. For this afternoon, I have been tasked to give you a set of recommendations as a way forward in the protection of the Chiquibul Forest. The Chiquibul National Park is one of 14 protected areas that makes up the Maya Mountain Massif. Despite being the largest protected area with 285,937 acres, the Chiquibul National Park can only maintain its long-term stability if the buffer areas are also well managed. With the purpose of improving functionality, connectivity, and socio-economic benefits, the call is for the government to reclassify the Western Maya Mountains protected areas as the Chiquibul Mountain Pine Ridge Landscape Conservation Trust. The Conservation Trust is best understood here as a legal agreement where a landscape directorate is appointed to maintain management of the public land as a conservation easement in perpetuity for the benefit of all Belizeans. The recommendation number 2, once the Conservation Trust is established, putting a landscape concept into operation is the next step. The FCD recommends the design of a Chiquibul Mountain Pine Ridge landscape management and conservation strategy and put into motion an integrated management plan that provides for specific zoning and utilization based on ground assessment of stocks, accompanied with rigorous controls and established mechanisms of monitoring and verification. A study conducted in 2020, terminating in the launching of a sustainable development plan, has been conducted for the Chiquibul Mountain Pine Ridge Caracol Complex. The guidelines expressed on the plan provides a concrete foundation to put an integrated management effort into full throttle. Number 3, FCD is the only assertive NGO with a natural and cultural management portfolio in the Chiquibul Forest. Its personnel are deployed every month in the Chiquibul Mountain Pine Ridge Caracol and in the Vaca region primarily for environmental monitoring purposes. The recommendation is for the government to appoint FCD as the co-managing entity of the Chiquibul Mountain Pine Ridge Landscape Conservation Trust, with responsibilities for headwater and biodiversity protection, which are two central pillars to the sustainable development of the Western Maya Mountains. At this time, there is no holistic coordinating mechanism for an integrated system of management for the Chiquibul Forest, and far worse, for the Western Maya Mountains. This lack of coordination creates tension, loss of opportunities, and ineffective landscape management. The recommendation is for the government to appoint and support operations of a high-level intersectorial Chiquibul Mountain Pine Ridge Landscape Directorate or a secretariat with a board of trustees made up of government representatives, managers, the private sector, and other stakeholders. Since the early 90s, the Caracol and Chiquibul region have been known to have majestic, unique, and representative natural and cultural resources. The highest Maya temple is found here. The longest cave system is located here, and the largest watershed is harbored here. The recommendation is for the government to direct the National World Heritage Advisory Committee to advance nomination of the Chiquibul Forest to include Caracol and the Chiquibul Caverns, the second World Heritage Site under a mixed natural and cultural designation. An updated co-management agreement template has been in the making for the last 5 years. At this time, all co-managers do not have a comprehensive updated co-management agreement. The recommendation is for the government of Belize to finalize a comprehensive co-management agreement with an expanded lifespan partnership of 25 years and to provide opportunities for NGOs like the Friends for Conservation and Development to generate a financing stream through entrance fees, user fees, and concessions. Since 2007, when FCD took over co-management responsibilities, it has always been working closely with the security agencies. And to them, we are thankful for all the support, particularly the BDF and the police department. FCD recommends an improvement of patrol efforts through the activation of a more effective Border Joint Forces Green Unit presence to include the BDF, the police, and natural and cultural managers to contain illegal incursions along the 95-kilometer western boundary of protected areas, starting from El Pilar Archaeological Reserve to the Columbia River Forest Reserve in the Toledo district. Reaching to the southern Rio Blanco Conservation Post or Cebada and Caballo Conservation Post is always a challenging and arduous endeavor for the Chiquibul Joint Forces. To enable for patrols to be more regular and effective, an upgrading of the road access is imperative. And to do this, the recommendation is for both the government and private sector to regularly assist in maintaining the road access. An effective and efficient patrol system enables for a more secure environment, which is good for everyone. The targeted investment fund undertaken by the Protected Areas Conservation Trust in 2019 has proven to be extremely instrumental in filling the gaps for an improved management effectiveness of protected areas such as the Chiquibul Forest. Continuous financial support from the Protected Areas Conservation Trust to properly undertake the conservation and management of the Chiquibul landscape is critical. PAC relies on fees paid by visitors to Belize. Thus, if you are visiting Belize, you are doing your part in helping protect Belize's green areas such as the Chiquibul Maya Mountains. Lastly, the sheer size and magnitude of the Chiquibul Forest provides a wonderful opportunity for people of all different walks of life to participate. That includes you. FCD's Junior Ranger, FCD's Youth Group, and FCD's General Membership Program enables for children, for youth, and adults to be an active participant in the work of FCD. Visit our website which is fcdbelize.org, to learn how to participate. Las Cuevas Research Station also caters for groups and families, and you are welcome to visit us. Your donations will go directly to managing the Chiquibul. Be a part of the FCD tracks. And thank you very much for all the support over the many years once again, and we hope to see you next time in the Chiquibul jungles.
Thank you very much, Rafael, for sharing with us your recommendations. And just to reinforce to remind you of some of the ways that you can get involved, as Rafael mentioned, you can visit the FCD website. That's fcdbelize.org. And from there, you can find out how to sign up to become a member. Membership is open to students, professionals, individuals, families, and organizations, and you can get those forms right on the website. You can also get more information from Friends for Conservation and Development, FCD Belize Facebook page, and they will be able to guide you from there as well. Remember that your donations are accepted as well. Become a friend of the FCD and Chiquibul, and you can help in keeping the many programs that they have going active, from the educational research that they do to the park rangers who are monitoring the entire area, the youth outreach, and the many other programs that they have ongoing. You can also email them at fcd@btl.net. And before we move into a question and answer segment, we know that there are quite a few questions yet to be answered. But before we get into that, you heard him earlier, but now we're actually going to show you what he looks like. As we said, we are showing you some of the team that's working there at FCD. So here you'll meet Lenny Gentle.
Hi, I am an FCD naturalist. I am in the Vaca Forest buffer zone to the Chiquibul, and this is the Chiquibul Symposium 2021.
All right, thank you very much, Lenny, and to the entire team there. At this time, I'm going to ask the panelists to start their videos and also to turn on their microphones, as well as we move into a question and answer segments. We're going to be joined by the panelists you heard from earlier when we were discussing the threats to the Chiquibul. That includes Dr. El McKay, Derek Chan, and Major Rogelio Pop. And we'll also be joined by Executive Director Rafael Manzanero. So let's talk about how you can get your questions as a part of this conversation. So if you look to the bottom of your screen, there is a little section that says Q&A. You can click on that and type your question in. We also have someone monitoring we have a team of volunteers, I should say, that are monitoring the Facebook live feed. So if you have questions there, we'll be able to tackle those as well. So I know that some of you are typing your questions in the chat, but if you want to ensure that we get them in, we'd hope that you put them in the Q&A section. All right, so let's get started. And the first question that will be, oh, here we go. So David Worthington is asking, how did Chiquibul get its name? Dr. K?
Yes, I had answered that in the chat, but basically it's based on the chicle tree. I think many Belizeans know about the chicle tree. For those who don't know, it's the tree from where you get the sap that makes up chewing gum, you know, the base for chewing gum. And chicle trees are very typical of the Chiquibul. They're associated with that forest. So that's where the name Chiquibul comes from.
That's right.
All right, so we have an anonymous attendee who's asking, what is the approach to sustainable infrastructure? Rafael, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, in easy terms, sustainability basically, as part of the formula, is for the longest term, the greatest benefit, and for the largest good for people. So in reality, infrastructure as such is one of those, and particularly I think a lot of the people in people's mind is about the road infrastructure, for example. The aspect on how really that can be able to do well in an area where it is proposed for a higher level of development. Infrastructure also, like in a park, of course, can also refer to what is really best in terms of the ecosystem, the kind of the capacity that can be undertaken there without really compromising the natural asset. So I think it is largely seen that, development as such in such a wilderness area, of course, has been more and is becoming much more accessible now. But I think development in the context, and I saw a note that was written by Mr. Oswaldo Sabito, for example, on his notes in terms of that, of the type of development, sustainable development, that of course, it should not really compromise the natural asset, but at the same time, it doesn't really mean also to lock the asset. So that is really a fine line that we'll have really to walk through. The Sustainable Development Plan really, brings about some of those contexts and the elements. So I would just leave it at that in terms of the infrastructure. Dr. Elma, I don't know if you want to add in something else.
Yeah, the question is general. So I think in general, it just needs to consider the pillars, and obviously that's going to be that that the environmental and social aspects related to any infrastructure are considered, not just the economic aspects. Because normally when we think of infrastructure development, it's because we're considering some sort of economic dimension to it. But the important part is to look at the social and the environmental aspects as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's move on to another question. We have journalist Ali Wonderman, who is asking, how will wastewater treatment and sustainability in general be addressed with the introduction of tourism to the Chiquibul?
I think that's a very good question. I know that there are concerns right now in the Mountain Pine Ridge, for example, with new developments. Now, the area of the Chiquibul, even though we know it as having the Maidenhead waters, but frankly, a lot of the water is really underground. So in the dry weather, for example, one can just be able to collapse because of not having really water in the landscape available or easily available. So I think that as we start to look in terms of tourism, there is a study that has already been done for the Chiquibul Forest in terms of catering for tourism. And one of those is to have a visitor monitoring framework in terms of numbers, in terms of capacity, and of course also indicating what or where some of these sort of developments can occur. So certainly that will have to be also addressed, and those have to be really maintained in mind as we are looking into that. Hopefully, however, and this is really, really important, the Chiquibul Forest, as how it was indicated in several segments, it includes 3 protected areas: the Chiquibul National Park, the Chiquibul Forest Reserve, and the Caracol Archaeological Reserve. Now, we are expecting, and we would hope, that the wilderness experience is going to be one of the key ones for the greater and the extended area of the Chiquibul. So there, at least it's not really pictured of high volume of tourism in these areas, at least in the wilderness zones. But certainly, yes, there will have to be some of these parameters of numbers, and also where any of those infrastructures are going to occur.
Now, Major Pop, during your presentation in the panel discussion, there was a question from Facebook, and the question was, how can we stop Guatemalans from entering the Chiquibul?
That's a good question, Marlene, and it is something that probably consumes a lot of our time, because it's not for us alone to come up with plans and concepts in how to address these issues. From where I sit as the operations officer, I can look at it at a focused perspective, and I may come up with some concept. But looking at it from the perspective of FCD, the wider government, and the people of Belize, I think the approach we have to take must be the whole of country, because we have, although not probably in Chiquibul, but a lot of people, Belizeans, have families across the Guatemalan border. So that approach must be the whole country approach, and in close collaboration with the government and peoples of Guatemala. I kind of make this analogy in terms of, to try to put it into context. We are like the country of Belize. We are like a neighbor living alongside a neighbor that doesn't care about what happens probably from his kids, pets that are not controlled. They can easily access your immediate space or your area. So these animals or these kids destroying your property, they eat your food, excreting all over the place. So the activities from the peasants that are involved in these encroachments, they are looked at as probably minimal. They're trivial concerns. And we have attended meetings at our level between us and the Guatemalans, and some of the higher level commanders in those areas kind of tell us that we probably create problems where there should be no problems. Because from their perspective, the people are just basically surviving. So they should have rights to access these resources, when in fact, they do not consider that the territorial integrity, the importance and the value of this concept and how it affects us as Belizeans. So that is how I would look at it. So our entire approach, our concept must be to get the buy-in and ensure that we press and impress upon the Guatemalan people and the government itself that they need to do a little bit more for their peoples.
Yeah. Well, there was a similar question, a question in the same vein asked earlier as well by Nicole Awil Gomez, and she was asking if there are any joint coordinated engagements with Guatemalan communities to combat wildlife or timber trafficking, and if there are any successful outcomes to share.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Major Prop, go ahead, sorry.
All right, just to continue on, Marlene, for us at the military, we have, according to the details of the confidence building measures in place between us and Guatemala, we have meetings, trimester meetings with the higher commanders of the Guatemala Army, those especially stationed in the Petén areas. And of course, then the byproduct would be that we have coordinated joint patrols, link-up patrols we call them, at various areas along the entire border between Belize and Guatemala. We share information, we share synopses or reviews of threats, how we can at least try to work together to resolve these. But again, I think the entire buy-in is not really there with respect to how they see it. It's not really a problem because you don't really have Belizeans committing these atrocious activities across their frontier. So that is where the dynamics of perspective comes into play.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Rafael, you wanted to add something very quickly?
Yeah, I just wanted to add in that, yeah, there is from the counterparts in Guatemala, it really has been growing over the many years. In fact, so much so that there are strong platforms. I mean, there are several platforms today that are probably even much more stronger than here now. And that is kind of unique. In fact, I think on the video of Rowan Ballas, he did demonstrate the kind of the activities ongoing there. And also the funders and the donors, the kind of the international cooperation that is now driven into the southern portion of the Petén. Mm-hmm. Under one major concept. The main concept that is being driven there is to have an economically sustained landscape. And so that is really more providing sort of the essential services to the communities, in terms of health issues, in terms of providing a local economic base, training, capacity building. And so I would say that the work of Association Balam in particular, who have been able really to lead that effort along with many other institutions, is really paying off. I would say that today it is not like in the past years. There are opportunities for the communities out there. There are good also examples on where the cooperation really has been helping a lot, either from the shut extraction, the reduction of that, the illegal logging activities, even forest fire preventions right now. We have a binational element right now as we speak, where they are, through the municipality of Nachor de Mencos, they have a whole cadre of people visiting the communities, particularly those ones that affected us last year. So that really is an ongoing effort.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we do have Honorable Orlando Habet, who is one of our attendees in today's session, and he had posed two questions, one being whether there was still ongoing collaborative efforts when you're looking at the situation of forest fires, but the other one was looking at the wire snipper program and whether that is still ongoing. Can someone shed light on that?
I can speak to Operation Wire Snipper. Sure. As I posted to the Honorable Minister, and I thank him for his participation and his sincere interest in this effort. Operation Wire Snipper, which we did last year, was a targeted, specific operation geared at addressing the accumulated some 25 activities that were verified through OS verification processes. It took us quite some time to get those details in order, and then it warranted a drawn-out operation to address those specific issues. So really that was specific because of the threat that were looming then. And so probably we do not foresee another need for such a drawn-out operation because we have changed our approach to addressing these issues. As I alluded to earlier, what we are doing now is we are being a bit more proactive. As soon as there is discovery of any illegal activity, we report them, we document, and then we follow the process of verifying that, yes, indeed, they are within the territory of Belize or across the AZ line, which we refer to. Once that is confirmed, we send out operations. It's a small scale to target those areas immediately. And I want to point out that our approach, while to some extent, a lot of people may chime in and argue that they are probably contrary to humanitarian laws, we have tried for so many years to be so lenient to these peoples. We understand their concerns. We understand that the problem is bigger than just coming across, destroying the resource that we have. But we used to, contrary to what FCD would allow, no, we used to allow them to reap their crops, to be humane, to try to appeal to their innate qualities that, all right, they allowed us to reap whatever it is that we're doing. It's illegal, so we should not come back. And those were the hope that we tried to do for so many years. It did not yield the results we wanted. So sadly and unfortunately, now we have stepped up our efforts. So whatever it is that is found and they're verified, they will be dismantled, they will be destroyed. Whatever it is that we have to do, we will preserve the integrity of our border.
Marlene, I just wanted to quickly add one more element to this discussion, and I think that's the not the need, but yes, for the efforts at the high-level diplomacy to continue, because what Major Pop and the FCD Rangers encounter on the ground is on this sort of person-to-person level. But as we know, a lot of the problems lie in that those communities are really marginalized within the Guatemalan governance system. And so it's so important to get that message across government to government, because it's their government has to also put some things in place to take care of those people. So whereas they might say, this is not a big deal, you know, they're not doing that much. Really, it's the fact that the proper infrastructure, the education, the support systems, the social safety nets are not there from the Guatemalan government. So the talks at the high level, the high diplomatic level, those are really very critical, I think, to complement the efforts that are taking place on the ground, as well as, you know, with rangers, but also with the bilateral associations like with Asociación Balam and WCS and those other partners on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have another question from one of our attendees. Kevin Rivera says, I've recently read about the University of Texas using NASA images that has shown deforestation in forests in Orange Walk. What do you guys think about that, and why is it happening? Now, I know it's not in the Chiquibul, but the issue of deforestation is still one worthwhile of tackling.
I could give that a shot, Marlene. I mean, I think deforestation is something that is happening throughout the country, and we have to understand that the drivers of that, the government of Belize did a fantastic, put a fantastic effort together to produce the first sort of, well, not the first, but the most recent land use map for the country, that really sort of showed us what were the real drivers of deforestation. So where deforestation is happening. A lot of that is actually conversion to grasslands, which has an implication that this is a lot of cattle ranching. So that is definitely a huge issue, and just overall large scale monocrop, you know, one crop like sugarcane, one crop like, you know, when you have systems with one crop, that's when we make ourselves most vulnerable. Now we understand that these are industries that, you know, some of that is needed both to feed ourselves as well as to export. But that's where I think as a country, we have to make decisions on, you know, where we can add value to that rather than sort of selling raw product. And also, I think there can be initiatives where we make the land that we already have cleared more productive rather than clearing more land. So it's not necessarily about clearing more land, but about good soils management and good practices on land that is already cleared. And I think, you know, if as a country we can go there and put an emphasis that it's not about just clearing more, but about, you know, increasing productivity in what we have, that's where the investments need to go so that we can balance both good things that we have going.
Well, thank you for putting that into perspective. And I guess, Derek, maybe you can chime in and talk about where you have seen deforestation in areas where cattle ranching has become more prevalent.
Yes, cattle ranching, we do area flights at least every other month, from January to about May. And we can see that the cattle ranching is huge. And I think also that the burning of pastures, that is how it is maintained, at least what we see in the Chiquibul, how pastures are maintained. Like you have to treat your pasture, you have to chop it, you have to fix it so that it's ready for every year to regenerate. So what they do in Chiquibul along the border, and some of this cattle is inside Belize also, and right near the forest. And so what they do is they will burn it. It's just easy to burn it in the dry season, so you don't really need to do anything else but just burn it. And you know, those turn into wildfires, and they could be very devastating. I think that has been happening also in the north. Particularly, there is a lot of pine forests and grasslands in the north. You know, sometimes what you see on the satellite image, it might be like land clearing, but it's just fires, which is just as land clearing, you know. But for example, in the Chiquibul, and I think this was another question that was asked, you know, about what has been recovered from 2018. 2016, we started to see recovery all through 2017, 2018, 2019, until last year when the big fires came. practically what had been recovered since 2016, we kind of like lost it. It will appear on the side.
Okay. Seems like Derek froze there, and it may just mean that it's time for us to close off this session. But Derek was able to put into perspective some of the deforestation that may be seen, and of course the continued threats from activities, whether it be cattle ranching that leads to some of the fires that we've seen in the Chiquibul. That concludes our question and answer section. We do appreciate those of you who submitted your questions. We apologize if we weren't able to get to them, but in fact, I've seen that our panelists have been answering individually as well. So go ahead and pose that and they'll be able to respond to you individually. And moving forward, we are going to get our thank you remarks for today. Once again, I do want to take the opportunity to say thank you to all the organizers. Thank you to the panelists who joined us today to talk about the threats of the Chiquibul, to be able to respond to the questions directly, those who shared their testimonials, the individuals who work with FCD, who also gave us a special invitation, the board and the staff of Friends for Conservation and Development. And of course, there's a team that has been working behind the scenes to ensure that everything goes as smoothly as you've seen it go today. But for our official thank you, we're going to have the president of Friends for Conservation and Development Board, Mick Fleming, provide the closing remarks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you for your participation in FCD's symposium today, and we hope that you have learned more about the many activities we're involved in. The effort of FCD has shown an increasing trend in management effectiveness rating from fair in 2006, when FCD first took on the co-management role, to very good in 2009. Over the past 10 years, from 2009 to 2019, the Chiquibul National Park has maintained its rating of very good and staying relatively stable, with scores ranging from 3.04 to 3.19, with 4 being the highest score. We feel that this assessment attests to the adaptive management skills of FCD and the bravery and enthusiasm of the staff, both in the field and administration, who, on a daily basis, focus their work in the protection of the Chiquibul Maya Mountains. Our mission is clear, and the vision of a sustained, viable ecosystem that can continue to provide critical goods and services, ranging from fresh air, wildlife, recreational activities, and perhaps most importantly of all, water, remains foremost in our minds. Approximately 50% of all the water consumed in Belize originates in the Chiquibul and supplies towns such as Benqueviejo, San Ignacio, Belmopan, Belize City, and all the villages in between. But our work has been made possible only because of your support. Annually, FCD works with over 100 non-government organizations, private sector and community-based groups on various sectors of our conservation agendas. FCD also counts on members who support the mission of the organization. We rely heavily on foundations such as the Protected Areas Conservation Trust, PACT, who are the ones who enable FCD to be effective by funding a base off of which FCD can stretch. Neither can we forget the governmental agencies that provide us with the necessary agreements and permits that allow us to function on public lands. The Forestry Department has been helpful in every respect, and we hope to keep this relationship in the future. It is encouraging to see the Chiquibul recovering through a collective approach, for which we're most grateful to our partnerships and hope to energize these in the future. And just for the sake of clarity, There are many ways in which you can participate in FCD. You can become a member. You could volunteer to be a citizen scientist. You can always visit Las Cuevas, knowing that your fees are going to be supporting fieldwork in the Chiquibul. You may have other skill sets that could open doors to future funding, for instance. The Chiquibul is so vast and the needs so large that anyone can essentially participate in one way or another. I would like to thank the Prime Minister, the Honourable John Briceño, for the keynote address on the importance of the Chiquibul. The government's support and endorsement are, of course, key to success. We are also very pleased with Minister Habet's intervention in setting the pace at the symposium and look forward to continuing the conservation work with his ministry. To the panelists, BDF Officer Major Rogelio Pop, Dr. El McKay, and Park Manager Derek Chan, thank you for outlining the challenges we face. To Mr. Rowan Balas of the Wildlife Conservation Society, Mr. Lin Young of BCOL, Mr. Stuart Crone, President of the BTIA, and Mr. Garfield Murillo of the Cayo Watershed Alliance, thank you for your testimonials and remarks on the critical needs for protecting the Chiquibul. And of course, this event could never have happened without the planning of Miss Valerie Woods and Idea Labs, as well as the video recording skills of Mr. Ricky Conil of Millennium Studios. To the moderator, CEO Marlene Cuellar, it could not have been better. We're grateful for the fluent and smooth conduction of the event. And to the press and media houses, Channel 5, Channel 7, and CREM, who kindly offered their space and time to make this an international event, we are grateful that this event could reach to the homes of so many. And many others were behind the scenes coordinating the communications. Thank you to you all for your technical assistance. And finally, but not least, a huge thank you to the U.S. Department of the Interior International Technical Assistance Program for the financial support in making this event possible. Thank you all very much indeed.
All right. And that was President of the Board of FCD, Mickey Fleming, giving those thank you remarks. We do want to add on to the list of the media collaborators, Love Television, who also streamed today's symposium live. A special thank you as well to the entire board and staff of FCD, especially to Esther Sanchez Show. She's been the one chatting with you in today's event chat box, and Ricky Conil, who is behind the scenes, ensuring that everything was running smoothly as well. Aurelia Show, who was managing all the comments online as well. Valerie Woods and Nicole Usher Solano of Idea Labs for the production of today's event. And of course, to the attendees who even willingly gave us a couple extra minutes of your time as well. We do appreciate it. And if you could spare just a few more, there is a very short poll that we are asking attendees to respond to, and that you will be able to see that as we close off as well. So please just take the time to let the organizers know what your feedback is of today's event. And we do hope you enjoyed. There it is, popping up on your screen. So please do let them know what you thought of today's event. And if you've been inspired by anything you've said today, there is one way that you can jump immediately into action, and that is by becoming a member of FCD and donating to the organization. So once again, go to their website, fcdbelize.org, email them at fcd@btl.net, find them on Facebook at FCD Belize, and you will be able to find out about all the different ways that you can help them. As we saw very early on, as you can see by my beautiful backdrop provided by FCD, there is much to see and much to do. Make sure, since it's now at the top of your bucket list, that you get around very soon to scratching it off. Thank you so much for dedicating your time this afternoon in learning more about the Chiquibul Forest and why it's so important to all of us. And of course, to encourage the FCD to continue doing the work that they have been doing and that they have our support. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening, and please continue to stay safe.